There we go. So last time we covered Mary Magdalene, Luke 8:2, she had 7 demons. And so the way that this came was not really from that. That idea, I guess, was still back there in the back of my head. But what came next, sometimes after I get off late nights, 10 o'clock, midnight, you're driving, and, you know, if the music's just not what you want to listen to, you might find a talk radio station. And there's a guy that most of the times I actually go in there and just turn them off because it's bizarre stuff. I mean, they talk about aliens and UFOs, and they get into really weird stuff. I mean, I guess the truckers listen to them, but, you know. Well, one night they had a Catholic priest who was an exorcist, and I thought, man, this is going to be, you know. But it was very fascinating. I'd love to have, this is the kind of guy that I would love to have sit down and have dinner with or something like that. But we're going to talk about demons and demons, kind of what that means and some things like that. So there are, you know, we see abundance evidence of demons in the Bible, and we've got, you know, like Satan, obviously. Satan's evil angels are known as demons. The word demons is from the Greek language daemon. It's found more than 75 times in the Greek New Testament. In the King James Version, we're going to get the word devil. In Christ's teaching, he often confronted demons in their activities in individuals. We're going to talk about kind of specifics of that, so I'm not going to allow that. But one of the things that one biblical scholar from SMU had said that they attack in a number of ways. One's physical illness, mental impairment, spread of false doctrine, spiritual warfare, and possession. And so I thought, yeah, I kind of like that too. But we're going to get into some more of this in a little different ways. So then everybody wonders, like, where do they come from? What are they? Well, one theory is that they were the spirits of deceased wicked men. Well, actually, we know that's not true because the Bible declares that the unsaved dead are in Hades and not roaming the earth. Okay, so we know where they are. It says they're spirits of a pre-Adamic Adam race. But there's no scriptural support, however, for this view. The Bible declares that Adam was the first man, so it's not like we had other people running around. Is this one dead? Okay. They are spirits from the unnatural union between angels and women in Genesis 6. However, that's without the slightest biblical support. Their most logical conclusion is the word demon is simply another title or name for fallen angels. And so they're probably heavenly, because it says that, you know, that Satan was cast out of heaven along with other angels. And so we think that they're subordinate to Satan. Satan was the boss, but that's kind of where that comes from probably. So just kind of wanted to kind of go with that. But there are named demons in the Bible. And so one is Molech. And so, you know, you hear the word Molech, and it says Molech was a demon. The worship of Molech was a recurring problem for Israel throughout the Old Testament. The origin of Molech worship is unclear. Scholars believe that Molech worship came to the region of Canaan with the Phoenicians. So when the children of Israel were moving into the Promised Land, one of the things that is said in Leviticus 18:21, you shall not give any of your children to offer them to Molech, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. And so we know that there was child sacrifice in the peoples around them as they moved into regions. That's horrible. You know, and so they, you know, obviously, you know, no matter who you are, you get into another region and another, you know, you might sit there and say, well, maybe we need to do, oh, no, you don't. That is one thing you do not do. And so God was making it very clear. But it talks about, then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Molech, the abomination of the Ammonites in the mountain of Jerusalem. So one of the practices of that was human sacrifice. But another thing we're going to get into, I think, is when we get in there in the bottom. Let me just kind of stop there, just kind of pause. But put in there that, so there's Molech, and we know that. Another name that we get, and we're going to cover this in a little more detail, but it's Legion, because the man that is on the other shore that lived in the tombs, we'll talk about in Mark 5, he said, you know, Jesus actually says, you know, who are you? And he says, Legion. Now, is Legion one or is Legion a lot? You know, because a Legion could be like a group of soldiers, and a Legion is, I don't know, something like, 100 men, 1,000 men. It's a large number. And so we don't know if that was one of those names that we're not sure what that name really was. But another one that we really get is Abaddon. Abaddon is described by John during the seven trumpets prophecy. They have as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit. His name is Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he is called Apollyon. Revelation 9:11. So we have another named demon that we clearly have. It says, when the fifth trumpet is blown, the abyss will open, and demonic locusts will be released to torture those who have not received God's seal. Their leader will be Abaddon, one of Satan's underlings, and the leader of the abyss. Abaddon will have a simple mission, inflicting pain and suffering on those who have not responded to God and accepted Jesus Christ as their Savior. So we know that one exists, and we know that he's chained, caged, whatever, but he will be released. And so, the good thing is it says that if you've responded to God and accepted Jesus Christ, the locusts and the evil can't touch you. So we're going to get into some of that in a little bit too. So what types of things does the Bible talk about with when we kind of take a walk on the dark side? Let's put it that way. Walk on the dark side. I kind of just came up with that. So divination. One of the things then by Deuteronomy 18:10 they talk about, named by Moses, was a prohibition of cult worship, and one of that was like, and we see this in movies, that you kill a chicken or some animal and then you look at its liver and its organs and determine the state of affairs and direction of the future. And that's from Ezekiel 21:21. Divinization is an illegitimate means of determining the will of God. The Christian desiring to know the will of God should consult the scriptures, not the stars. That's Psalms 119:9. So that's one way that you could kind of see an evil practice of, can I do something to kind of tell me the future based on whatever? And so you see, even in this, it requires some death. It requires a sacrifice of an animal, so that way you sacrifice this animal and look at stuff. That is something that also we very much know was a practice of the Roman Empire. The Romans, they commonly did stuff like that. And so that's kind of another thing about where you live and what's around you. But basically they're saying, if you want to know the will of God, don't look in chicken guts or don't look at livers of animals, of bulls or whatever. Go look at the Bible. Another kind of a satanic worship is necromancy. And this is also banned. Necromancy is an effort to communicate with and interrogate the dead. As the Bible teaches, the dead are unable to communicate with the living. Luke 15:27-31. It only stands to reason that those who claim to have this ability are lying or are themselves deceived. In either case, the necromancer was considered an abomination of the Lord. Deuteronomy 18:11 and 12. Now, you can say, well, where does that manifest? This is just kind of I had, some of this I just kind of think back. At some store somewhere growing up, there was a Ouija board. And I was like, oh, okay, what's this? And I actually had my own money or whatever, and I wanted to buy it. And my mom was obviously not too impressed with that. Didn't really want me to do it. But she didn't, and she was a teacher, which I think was good, but she didn't definitely disapprove of it totally. What she kind of tried to explain is what it is and what's going on, kind of hoping that would stop, but I guess she can kind of tell that sometimes I'm a little determined. So she let me buy the thing, and we brought it home, and we did it. But what basically you kind of discovered was that it's kind of one of those things that you're controlling, and you get more hands on this thing, and people start spelling stuff, and you kind of get, well, who's really in control? Because you can kind of you can go way over here and then kind of get back, And so it's one of those things that's just like lying. It's like necromancy, and people actually start believing this stuff that, well, I can get messages. And so I think if you don't have your true direction, that could be a real problem. And quite frankly, what's funny is I bought the thing. We did that once, and I don't think I've ever did anything else with it. I said, this is such a ripoff, This is not any fun, which is probably the appropriate response. But, there are people who will do that sort of stuff. Magic. Well, before I leave necromancy, that we talk about communicating with the dead in this section, there is the portion where that Saul really wants to know what's going to happen, and Saul goes to, was it the witch of Endor? I think that's right. He goes to the witch of Endor and asks her, and she actually, tells him that he can speak to, I think he's trying to speak to Samuel, because Samuel is always his guide and everything else. Well, Samuel dies, and so, there's that section. So you can look that up and read that. But that's prohibited. And why? Well, because really you're not getting anything out of it. So do we see something like that today? I would argue that we do. In fact, Friday I was driving and I stopped at a light, and there was one of those caution tapes because there's a driveway there, and so obviously the business was closed. They didn't want people turning in there or whatever. I was like, so that's what caught my attention was the tape, and they'll look over, tarot card reading and tell your fortune and communicate with the dead, and they had all this stuff, and you're like, really? It's a nice building. So I'm like, how do they pay the bills? People really doing this, We used to have the one over there by the Firestone place off the road. And so, I don't want some of those people hunting me down, but, it's the same thing of turning over cards and expecting that will determine your future and that kind of stuff, or let's communicate with your dead one or whatever. It's a deceptive practice, but you got to be kind of weak-minded to believe it and let them go with it, and pay your money for it, whatever. So magic. The use of magic formulas and incantation was forbidden. Today it's popular to distinguish between white and black magic. We act like white's good magic and black is bad magic, right? Another one of those things with it, just whatever. But the reality is that all magic get their source not from God, but from demonic power, right? I mean, where's it coming from? So that by itself says magic is not. And those practice magic are under certain limits as to what they can accomplish. Daniel 4:7. Okay? But even when it appears that magicians are able to duplicate the power of God, they still fall short of what God is able to accomplish. Exodus 7:11 and 12. Classic example of that in the Bible is that Moses has to go to the Pharaoh, and it's like, I don't know why they get into this, but they get in kind of this contest where that, I'm going to show you this, show you that. And I never did understand that really before I started studying a little more. Each one of the things that God did through Moses attacked one of the gods of the pharaohs and the Egyptians. So they had at least 10 gods that Yahweh through Moses was attacking and proving he had power over. And so but the classic thing there is we had the deal where that God said, cast your stick down, your staff down, and it became a stake. And so the magicians come in and said, we can do that. And so they were magic, and they could make it, somehow, had a container, something that they could manipulate and do snakes. So they're like, see, we can do snakes too. And it went on and on until they get to things like, we can turn this river into blood. We can, and so each time they're going after, that's a different study. But each time they're going after a specific Egyptian god, and Yahweh's, Yahweh wins. Yahweh's got control over all that. Okay, so the next one is sorcery. And sorcery, it says, closely related to magic. Magic usually relates to accomplishing specific tasks, such as rods becoming serpents, whatever. Whereas sorcery relates more closely upon calling the demons to create situations around people, kind of like cursing or cursing somebody. Incantations or omens. These practices may have also included the use of mood-changing or mind-altering drugs. This has led some Bible scholars to denounce the use of such drugs because they're used as part of occult worship. And then we have, the next, around the world today, there exists a growing number of those who call themselves witches. Witchcraft is directly opposed to God. Deuteronomy 18:10. And then I talked about Saul. I actually got a little ahead of myself, but that's in 1 Samuel 28:9 when he talked to the witch of Endor. And so that is to use this magic and sorcery to accomplish the will of demons. Okay. Next one is astrology. And I want to be very careful and make sorcery. That's going to be, I think that's witchcraft. Yeah. Witchcraft is the next one. You could have my notes. I'll just give them to you because I've pulled them off stuff. But the next one is astrology. And when I say astrology, the word sounds so much like astronomy. And so I think that's kind of a bad thing. Astronomy is the study of stars and planets and how they move and that sort of stuff. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't see how anything could be wrong with that because you're studying God's creation. It'd be no different than studying plants or animals, or it's just science. However, astrology is the whole thing when they try to take the lining of planets and make it into something, And so astrology is what you see when you get your horoscope, and it says, well, the son of Venus is in the nadir of Apollo, and therefore this is a good time for you to make friends, or this is a good time for you to make a purchase, or this evil will become you, or they have all these, so you read your horoscope, which should be called horoscope, not a horoscope. I'm just joking, but and so what's funny about that is that to me is more of the power of suggestion. And you can say, well, the power of suggestion really doesn't work, does it? I mean, I'm kind of my own person, and I kind of, have my own thoughts and whatever. And this is one of those times I must confess I did something very bad. I owned up to it at the end of the day, but I did it. Somewhere I was reading about that, human beings are suggestible and everything else. And so within a group of my friends, we singled out one of them. We singled out John. And we said, okay, today we're just going to ask John if he feels okay. You feeling all right? Are you sick? And so this went through most of the day. And he was about to go home from school. And so then that's when I said, oh, no, this has got to stop. I said, John, I just want to let you, I'm sorry, but we did this as kind of like an exercise because I'd heard that people would believe this stuff. And seriously, he, by the end of the day, was almost ready to go home. He said, I feel nauseated. I feel, and I felt horrible. But people are like, people can do that. So I guess if everybody came up to you on a certain day and did something like that, there's the power of suggestion. Well, to me, astrology is taking something in and then looking for it, Some friend will bring great promise, and so you're going to go, Carl, do you have a great promise today? Hey, Vima, do you have any great promise today? What's going on? If you look for it long enough, you're probably going to find something, and you're going to be able to put it in a category. Does it mean that it's reality and whatever? No, but you're looking for it. So you're going to do something foolish because it's going to say, great wealth will come. Well, then I need to make an investment today. No. So that's why it talks about it. In Egypt, God challenged the astrological gods of Egypt in sending 10 plagues which directly attacked the authority of these gods. The highest Egyptian of gods was Ra, the sun god. 3 days of darkness was a direct indictment against the religions of Egypt. So that's why I'm going to go back to that. So that's where we get astrology. Even in today, I don't know. I mean, there newspapers have them. I mean, you can go through the Farmer's Almanac in different places, and they have that stuff in there. So anyway, so what are the works of demons? I think that my answer to that would be very simple. I'm going to get a little bit more of this, but I think that demons are able to do whatever we allow them to do, whatever we give them an opening to do. But one of the things that is in here is that demons unknowingly sometimes do the will of God. You're like, what? Yeah. It must be frustrating to demons after they had accomplished some evil scheme to later find out that they were carrying out the will of God. Satan did not realize what God wanted to do in Job's life when he caused him physical suffering. Because at the end, Job says, it all worked out for good. But also God used an evil spirit to accomplish his will in the life of Saul, first king of Israel. So 1 Samuel 16:14. So there was this spirit that came to him and did this. On another occasion, God used a lying spirit to deceive the false prophets of an evil king. 1 Kings 22 and 23. At the end of the Great Tribulation, demons this is the future thing, will be used by God to gather the nations of the world to battlefields of Armageddon. Revelations 9:16. So God is able to use even demons to accomplish his will. Okay? So going into, and we can go into some specifics here of the different things, but at this point, I'd like to take a little bit of a twist. We may come back into some of this. But I think before I get away from this, what will happen to demons? Well, Matthew 8:29, the demon said to Jesus, "Have you come here to torment us before the time?" And so demons understand something of their eternal destiny. The phrase "before the time" could mean that they feared premature expulsion from the man, but it's probably meant premature judgment to hell. The destiny of demons can be summarized in 3 phases of confinement. Presently, they're confined more to the earth. This is their playground, but in Revelation 9, great tribulation, they will come from the bottomless pit to afflict the people, and then they're going to end up in the lake of fire. So we know that sort of stuff. So they will be eternally confined there, Matthew 25:41. But it also says that the Bible also teaches that angels are not exempt from judgment. Paul asked the Corinthians, "Do you not know that we are judges to angels?" So you didn't really think about it maybe, but towards the end of the age, it'll be our responsibility as Christians to represent God in the role of judge. It may be during the tribulation, the millennial kingdom, or eternity to follow. We will serve as judges similar to the judges who ruled over Israel's first king. As judges, we will be given a position of authority over angels. Well, are demons angels? Are we going to be judging them? Good question. Don't know. And so kind of a little quick walkthrough of some different mentions of demons through verses in the Bible, starting in Leviticus. Leviticus 17:7. They must no longer offer their sacrifices to the goat demons that they have prostituted themselves with. This will be a permanent statute for them throughout the generations. Deuteronomy 32:17. They sacrificed to demons, not God. To gods, little g gods, they had not known, new gods, little g gods, that had just arrived, which your fathers did not fear. And so he's talking about evil things that happened in their past. And Jeroboam in 2 Chronicles 11:15, Jeroboam appointed his own priests for the high places, the goat demons and the golden calves he had made. So the golden calf has a history preceding when they came into the land of Canaan, where that region they were. So when Moses goes up to get the 10 Commandments, the people turned astray, became afraid. What are we going to do? And then they turned to, like I said, the things that they kind of knew before, knew were going around. So that's when they built the golden calf. So the golden calf is from Jeroboam as well. It's an evil thing, just done, period. I talked about Molech in Psalms 106:37. It says they sacrifice their sons and daughters to demons. Isaiah 13:21. But desert creatures will lie down there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches also will live there, and wild goats will dance there. Just gotta stay on that one a little bit. Personally, I guess I've never really thought that owls, ostriches, and wild goats were demons. Never was a problem. And I don't really have that much. I've not been around ostriches very much. But I can say that I think that there are things in our world that could be construed as evil because of fear. I think fear is a big thing. In fact, we went to a wedding yesterday, and the groom's brother was doing the toast, and he said, and he would come running into my room because he was afraid. And he would say he was afraid of what was out, the monsters out of his window. Window? Usually the monsters are under my bed, in the closet, right? And so when he said that, I'm like, I'm all ears. Well, he said every house that we have lived at had a forest out the back, and for some reason our room was facing the forest. And so, just think about movies, the Blair Witch Project, bad camera moved through a forest, and so those are dark places. The sun doesn't get through. We can be afraid. And so there are things in our world that can create fear. An owl, oh my gosh, My joke about the goats is because I have goats, and yes, I will totally admit they're evil, but they're not evil because they're driven by Satan or something. They're just evil because they want to get out. Sheep will graze in the center. Goats will go down the edge and try to find any little way they can get through. Neighbor called me 2 weeks ago and says, "Do you have a goat with?" Yes, yeah, that's her. That's mine. I was like, how the heck did she get through? Because he and I built that fence, and we did a mighty fine fence. And I was like, how the heck she do that? And so what was interesting is a couple of days later, she came back, tired of that place, wants to be back with her family. Had a good vacation, but ready to come home. And so I'm trying to get her back, and I'm walking down the fence trying to get her to open it. We share a gate, so I open the gate. And as I'm doing that, I said, I know exactly how you did it. Dang it. Because I've put a skirt so that his goats can't come through in this passageway, but I'd left it open a little bit, but she had gone under it from the other side, and then couldn't get back. And so it's funny, but you can trace where they got out, but that's a goat. They're evil. They will try to get out. They will do it. Just trust me. If there's any way a goat can get through, they will. But I don't know about ostriches. And then I'm going to take you on a little journey because still on the fear thing. I think that, the evil does come to us fear because, the Bible says fear not and everything else. But a personal story for me, too, is when I was, still elementary, certainly wasn't junior high because by then I wouldn't have been afraid of this kind of stuff. And so my mom had bought a TV for us when she was a school teacher, but it was one of the very first color ones, but it was also this big. Okay? Yeah. It was the tube kind and everything. Had the antennas, Well, she had remarried and all this other stuff, and we had a big TV in the living room. That's what we watched. Well, the brothers just weren't into it, so I squirreled that one away in my room. And the other thing that I discovered, late Saturday nights, so it's a good thing Sunday followed, but late Saturday nights, there was a TV station out of Midland that was Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. She was the leader for this, and then they would have all these horror shows. And so, Saturday night, if I couldn't sleep, whatever, they'd send me to my bed anyway, knowing we had church the next day. And so I discovered if I got one of those earplugs, which you could get, and plug it in, then nobody could hear it. And if I covered it with a blanket, then you couldn't see the light. She couldn't see the light out of the door, and so I could get away with watching, the stuff I wasn't supposed to. The forbidden fruit. And I will never forget. Okay, I grew up in West Texas. We have rattlesnakes. Every time you get out of the car, mom or grandma or somebody would say, watch for snakes, watch for snakes. I've probably heard that thousands of times. And we grew up, we watched for snakes. Snakes are, they'll hurt you. We had rattlesnakes. We knew that. And so I'll never forget. So here, one Saturday night, I've got the earplugs in. I've got the thing covered. And for whatever reason, I just turned into a portion of a movie. I didn't get to the first part for whatever reason. It's one of the, and trust me, sometimes you'd start a movie and then the weather would turn bad, and between here and there we wouldn't get it. It's like the conditions had to be just right to get, so I got the little antennas and whatever, And I turned there, and there's this black man who is old because his hair is white. And he's sitting in front of this fireplace. And I'm setting this up because you're going to sit there going, that was scary. He's sitting there in front of this fireplace, and he reaches over to put another stick on the fire, and it becomes a snake. What? And I'm like, that's too scary. And something else happened, so I turned it off, and went to bed. That was all it was. That was it, okay? But what was interesting is, and God was getting me, and it was very good, because I went to bed. I had a blanket over my feet, which I never slept with, but probably the blanket I'd had on the TV, So I went to sleep, had a blanket on my feet, and I wake up, and I was dreaming that I had a snake on me. There's a snake on my legs. And I'm laying there going, and it's going to bite you if you move. What do you do? So I'm just there in fear going, there's a snake on my legs, and if I move, it's going to bite me. What do I do? And I just laid there in fear, and then finally at one point I just kicked, and and I realized there's no snake at all. It was my dreams, and it was from that movie. But see, our body, we have a way to do that. We do what we're not supposed to, and things leak in, And so that's it. And then Matthew 4:24, which is actually, this is a very positive statement. And his fame went out in the world of Syria, and they brought to him all that were ill, suffering under various diseases and pains, and those possessed by demons, and lunatics and paralytics, and he healed them. Okay. Want to go a little bit into power over demons and back to Jesus, and then we'll get into the verse that I really want to, the section I really want to hit harder because it's kind of the core of some of this. It's where I think the biggest discourse happens. But Matthew 7:22, this is, Mark 5 is where we're really going to go. So you want to find that, you're going to be ahead of this because this is only going to be a couple of verses. But Matthew 7:22 says, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? And I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Therefore, anyone who hears those words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. So that needs to be in context with what he's saying, because you're thinking, well, if you prophesy in his name and use his name, aren't you on his team? And Jesus said, no, these people really are not on my team. What they're doing, they are using my name to do this business, but they don't acknowledge me as Lord, and that's not where they're getting it. So, and we talk about, his name has power. There's a concrete example. His name has power because these people learned that, and so they knew they could do these things. Okay, leading up a little bit, Mark 3:13 through 19. Jesus picks the 12 disciples. That's what's going on in that section. So I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of an overview of that. Mark 3:20. Oh, wait, did I get something wrong there? No, there's no. That's the problem in Matthew. No wonder it doesn't look right. Okay, Mark 3:20. Let's see. Back up one more. Okay. And he came home, and the crowd gathered again to such an extent that they could not even eat a meal. So there's so many people in that house. When his people heard of this, they went out to take custody of him, for they were saying, he has lost his senses. And they're talking about Jesus. They're like, oh, what's going on? And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem were saying, he is possessed by Beelzebub, Satan, devil, whatever. And he casts out the demons by the ruler of the demons. So they're accusing Jesus of doing this because he's a fallen angel. He's on Satan's side. And I think this is fascinating, because, and he called them to himself, and he began speaking their parables. How can Satan cast out Satan? How can this evil Satan demon have the ability to be over himself? No. If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. If Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but he is finished. Okay, and this is the part I want to throw in here a little bit. But no one can enter the strong man's house and plunder his property unless he first binds the strong man, and then he will plunder his house. Okay? It's. I mean, you could use the same term. If a guy's got a weapon, until you get a hold of that weapon and control that, you can't plunder his house. Just put it in some other terms. But he's basically saying you got to tie the guy up. And so he's basically telling them that by the power that I do this, I don't control these demons by the powers of evil. And so once he says that, I would assume that the room got very quiet. Because then they have to think, because they're trying to prove that this guy is not who he never says he is. You get that? Jesus is not foolish enough to say, I'm the Son of God. Because he did that, they just initially just drag him off. He's making them discover who you say he is. Okay? And so at the point when he says that, nobody's going to go plunder a guy's house unless he ties up the strong man. So who has authority over evil? He's asking them that. So it's kind of like that Monty Python scene. They come to the conclusion it's just got to be God. Okay? And so he's basically telling them, they're saying, like, they try to accuse Jesus of saying, you're evil. He says, no, really, I'm not. I have power over these things. How do you have power over these things? You're good. Ooh. We'll get to that. And then we get into moving just some forward, because there's that one thing you got to know from Mark, and then you got to get into the boat, and you got to get in the storm, and then Jesus, calms the storm. They wake him up and said to him, "Teacher, don't you know we're dying here?" And he gets up and he rebukes the wind. They said that, that it's kind of like he does something that's very much like a parent would do to a baby. Hush. And it stops, It wasn't a big incantation or, whatever. And it's like glass, And so why are you afraid? Why do you have no faith, And so they get to the shore. And when they get to the shore, and I'm going to kind of do this in quick parts because I could cover just this entire 5. I've studied 5. I know a lot about it, but I'm just going to do it in big, broad strokes. So he gets there, and this guy comes running out of the tombs and had an unclean spirit in him. And it says, and he had dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain. So there's a lot of things about this passage if you read it and contemplate it and think about it. And I would argue that the people of this man's community are guilty. Because if you chain somebody up, you got to have a key. And I don't know that this guy was really strong enough to break chains. Maybe he was. Maybe their chains were bad, but they did it more than one time. So somebody's letting him loose. Just a thought. Screaming among the tombs and the mouths, gashing himself with stones, cutting. One of the psychological things from cutting has to do with abused males are more likely to be cutters. Not in our modern society going back, though, that was it. So he may have been an abused child, too. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed before him and shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" He did it. Wait a minute. Pharisees are sitting there. They're not going to talk about that. He's not got, they don't want to say that. This guy comes up and does it. "I implore you, by God, do not torment me." Is it a torment for Jesus to be in presence of evil? Yeah. For he had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit," and ask him, "What is your name?" He said, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And so then he cast him into the pigs, and you can go in the whole thing of who is running the pigs in the first place, because the Jews and Muslims are not supposed to be eating pigs. So who's raising the pigs? Oh, interesting. There's all kinds of nice twists on this thing. But I want to get here because there's that, and then I think the fascinating part of this story is that the guy who now is cleaned of these demons, like Mary Magdalene, he now wants to follow Jesus. He comes with just this heart of, "I want to go with you." And he says, "No, you got to go back. You got to go back to that city." And so it's one of those times you're like, "Oh, wow," he actually sends him back. Well, he sends him back because now he sent back a billboard into their community that talks about evil and that this guy has been changed, and who changed it and why was he changed. And this is actually, the area of this is not Jewish. It's not a Jewish place. It's on the other side. It's run by Romans or whatever. But yet still the pig farmers, they might be feeding the Romans, but it's probably a Jew who's raising pigs to feed the Romans. And, it's not supposed to be doing that. But he's making business doing bad business. And so, that was a business proposition that went bad when the pigs went off the cliff. Just put it that way. But, so he sends a guy back. And so I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but there's nothing worse than having a kid at the door, "But Daddy, I want to go with you." That's kind of Jesus had to sit there and say, "No, you got to go back. I'm sorry." And I know that he felt bad. So anyway, you go from there, and I'm just going to put this in perspective before I get into some of this other stuff. So then Jesus walking through the crowd after that, and the crowd came to him, and he says, "Who touched me?" Remember that part? Woman with issue. So he heals her, the one with the vaginal bleeding, done. And then there's the deal where that there's a child, Jairus' daughter. He raises her, okay? So Mark, I'm just putting you a structure in here so when you read these, you look at this specifically. But my seminary prof described Mark as like an Oreo. The edges interpret the middle, or the middle interprets the edges kind of thing. So if I just told you those things, that he calms the storm, he fixes the demon-possessed man, he fixes the woman's problem, he fixes the child, you can see that Jesus has authority over creation, over man, woman, and children. He has authority of all over these. And so he's proven that. And so I kind of want to get in that so you kind of see that in context, just because I think that's kind of fun. Now, where do I want to go from here? Back to this radio show. Because it made me really start kind of digging in and thinking a little bit. Because I'm sitting there, a Catholic exorcist. Why all this of this? You know? I mean, that's the kind of stuff of movies and, you know, vomiting pea soup and, you know, whatever. It's for kids to be scared and whatever. This priest was absolutely fascinating because what he was talking about, and I think we would all agree, and like I said, there may be more questions for you with this than answers. But he was talking about how that we allow evil in and what it does to us. And when I say that, you could pick an example of saying, well, a young man goes after work, drinks with his buddies at a bar, starts doing that. Well, before you know it, every day he's going to the bar and drinking, and before you know that, he's an alcoholic, and he destroys his life. He, you know, dies somehow. You know, it's all the above. He destroys his liver, whatever. But he let the evil in, and it kind of got onto him. And I'm not saying that alcohol is totally that, but for some people it can be that kind of problem. Pornography or something like that, you know. It starts out as they don't think it's that big of a deal, and then it gets control of their lives. And so the evil has been let in, and the evil keeps going. A classic one that I see a lot of, methamphetamines. And I want to make a quick distinction between the two, but you know, there's something called schizophrenia that occurs to people who are usually around the age of 18. It's a mind problem. Nobody really knows why. I mean, we can't really say it's a chemical imbalance, but we don't really know why they get this. But there can be a little bit of genetics. It can kind of run in families and this sort of stuff. But they start losing touch with reality. They hallucinate. They hear voices. It starts out sometimes as more of just mumblings, and then it can become clearer, and it can be accusatory. And so you want to ask, what are the voices telling you? What are they saying? You know, what are they? You know, and it's not, and it's never. I mean, it's, well, yeah, it can be kind of glorified too. Let's put it that way. Sometimes the voices can say, "Oh, you're God," you know, you are. You know, it can be that way, but often, and there are different types, but also it's usually a very much negative. And so then people get trapped by these voices that they want to start hurting themselves. And so we have medications that can help, but there's that. But that's mental illness, and that happens without them doing stuff. Okay? Unfortunately, methamphetamine, you start doing that, and you can look exactly like that. And sometimes if you stop early enough, you can stop the progression, and sometimes you can't. And so there are people on methamphetamines that look just like the schizophrenics. Their world is ruined. And so they start letting it in and thinking, well, it's a good high and whatever, but over time it can. And so my ongoing joke about the methamphetamine users is like, you know, we have the Walking Dead and the zombies and everything. They're a lot like that. You know, their teeth are ruined, their skin color's not so good, they don't smell good, and they're kind of zoned out. They've burned all their epinephrine out, and they become like zombies, you know. But this priest was talking about evil and how we let it in, and so, you know, you're thinking, wait a minute, demon possession, you know, is it really? And I want to kind of get you what the guy said, that this was one of those things that I had to start thinking even more and more about, and there's a lot of biblical proof for this and everything else. But you're thinking, demon possession, exorcism? Well, I will also confess to you that there have been times in the emergency department, I've had people in front of me that I'm like, is this mental illness or is this just evil? And I've prayed about it. And I generally come to conclusion that I don't really know, but there's still a human being in there that needs help and whatever. Well, so for this exorcist, they asked him, they said, are you ever afraid? And the guy chuckles. He's like, he said, well, no. I said, you know, I know they have no authority over me. he said, and I thought, that's not what you'd have said in the movies. In the movies, they all go in there afraid. He said, yeah, that the demons, sometimes there are things that happen that, may not be explainable and whatever, but I don't really dwell on that because he's talked about things being broken and, all this kind of stuff. But I just started going, wow, that's impressive because that's what this guy does. And that's what he says that. But he goes through this whole thing about allowing sin in and how that sin possesses you. And so, what are your demons? What really are demons? But it's still evil. Now, let's look at the difference between what happened in the Old Testament when we're talking about this stuff and how did Jesus change that. So, in the Old Testament, before Jesus came, the Spirit of God dwelled over people. So when going back to Samuel and Saul and David, Samuel anointed oil on them, like putting the Spirit over them. The Spirit protected them, whatever. Spirit of God, But remember, in Acts, Jesus says, I send you a new comforter. And so then the Holy Spirit becomes internal. So we take the light into us, okay? And there are multiple deals about, light and darkness cannot coexist. Light casts away the darkness, and it doesn't take much light to do that. Going back to the forest and the scariness and all that stuff, a little bit of light. It's like a kid may need just a night light, but a little bit of light does a great deal. So for Christians, and I think that this is one of those things that if you kind of had fun in conversation that exorcist, he'd probably say, yeah. He says, as a Christian, we're filled with light. And so we're not afraid of the darkness. I'm not afraid what they think they can do or whatever. This demon really has no power over me. And, do you really kind of think that in your world? I guess that I've kind of gotten to where I just don't even think about it or worry about it. I don't give Satan that kind of power. But if you're an unbeliever, you can do that. Let's give him a little power. We talk about these in movies of selling your soul to the devil and making a deal and whatever. He can't have my soul. My soul's already spoken for. But there are people in this world who think that they can take a walk on the dark side. And they can think it's okay. And they can think. And so that's even harder. So, I'm still sitting there going, what is this exorcism? What is it really? And I don't have any answer, I'll tell you. But I will tell you that I've seen times in churches when people have something eaten them, is the best way to describe it, something eaten them, that it takes an event, a public event, in which that they can rid themselves of that. Okay? And so we sometimes see people who have, miraculous things that come up in testimonies, or they need somebody to pray over them or whatever, and that is getting that evil out. Whatever it is letting them let go. Because even as Christians, though, even the light, you can still allow a little darkness in to rule you if you're not careful. You can let a little anger, you can bear a little grudge. There are things that you can do to let this evil take a little handhold, and it just keeps working on you. And so a big part of that is to accept forgiveness, to say that, one of the best things that could ever happen to you about anger is saying, God's going to get you. Really, none of my business, It's my problem that I'm angry with you, but I got to let that go. But God is yours. You get what I'm saying? And so I think that so we talk about demon possession because for years I've kind of wondered, is it that Jesus cast out all these and they're really, because we don't really talk about demons in the way that they talk about them here, but at the same time, and I'm not minimizing, I guess I am minimizing the demons, but this whole concept, because, Jesus does these things like this guy, he casts out the demons. And so they also talk about that something has to happen to fill that void, because if it doesn't, the more demons will come in, 7 times more. And so this guy needs Jesus, and Jesus is obviously giving him Jesus. And so we've got to start thinking in terms of, well, are there demons out there? There's evil. And so is it different since Jesus came? Well, yes, there's a difference in us. There's a difference in the Holy Spirit. That's different. But are they still out there? Is there still evil? Are there still people who need our help? Absolutely. And so just kind of that's my deal. There's probably more questions here than answers, but Is evil real? I truly believe it. I mean, it doesn't take long to pick up a headline and just start reading what people are doing and then start trying to figure out what their motives are. Is evil real? Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there people who demons possessed? Yeah, probably. Are they going to speak to me? Jesus talks to them. Oh, and the other thing is interesting in there is that there's also some sections I didn't really get to, but they said that people are brought with demons, and Jesus hushes the demon. Says you can't talk. Why? Kind of like this guy. Jesus is the most God. Why are you tormenting me? He didn't want the Pharisees to see that. Said, hey, can't talk to me, but I'm kicking you out. Because they knew who he was. And this is an example of, this is a big faith statement, A guy who didn't even know him runs up to him and says, I'm afraid of you. You can harm me. What are you going to do to me? It's not time. Oh, you're Jesus. Oh, you're God. So I just take that with you. And I guess one of the things that has kind of struck me, even about things like schizophrenia and stuff like that, is that, there's a human response to this. And we can't help but it hits chords in us that can create humor that's inappropriate, and we don't know that. I mean, just like why, and I still don't understand this, in these cartoons, why are people getting bonked on the head is funny. But, we have weird things in our bodies, and schizophrenia is one of those things, man, that is so weird, that's funny. We have that, but it's not funny for that person. And it's not at least, and so I had an encounter one time that this guy was schizophrenic, brought in doing really strange stuff, and so some of the nurses were snickering about that, and the sister who also was a nurse was feeling about that. And I said, stop right there. I said, I want you to understand. I said, they're not laughing at your brother. They're laughing at what this stuff is. And but you got to understand, it's an emotion that is they don't know what to do with their emotion. It's either laugh or cry, and they don't know what to do with it. And I said, it's not about him as a person, trust me. Every one of those people is here to do anything he needs. But that's an emotion that they can't understand. And I said, he's got an illness, and I think you know that, and I know that, and they all know that. But what his behavior was so interesting that we have trouble with that. And so that's kind of a hard thing to control. But I think that's one of the things of how do you deal with evil in your world and that sort of stuff. Step one is probably avoid it. Teach people to avoid it. At the same time, can evil lead people to Jesus? Absolutely. And so it may be that you just need to start kind of working on that, getting in the right place. 5 minutes. Sure. I haven't really, I kind of know a little bit about it, but I think one of the things that always bothers me, I really don't like crowds for that very reason. There are so many things that can go wrong, and when you get that many people together, and so was it evil incarnate? Probably, absolutely, But just to give you one example, this is one of those comments that just forever, because I'm hearing this and I'm putting together. There was a young girl who was at a concert in Austin years ago, and she was not very large, but she was crowd surfing. So they were, and these are total strangers doing this. And so I'm sure she was having a great time up there because you could just tell when she's telling the story, she's overjoyed. But then her voice drops and she goes, and they dropped me. I'm like, yeah? They're not your friends. They're not your family. To them, you're not really even a human being. You're just something to pass around the crowd. I didn't say all that. I'm thinking it, But yeah, for concerts, when we get that many people together and evil gets its way and something breaks loose and, it's kind of, and you're right. It's not that this was not a praise worship service for God.
So when something breaks down, it's every man for themselves. It's not a Christian thing where like, I will die for that brother, you know. And so, yes, I guess that's a very good point, because I didn't think about it in terms of watching what happens with Christians and watching what happens, and even just people who are not Christians but are good, you know, the goods, leaning to the good. Because, you know, we've had people do stupid stuff, like things are happening, people are being attacked, and people break out their phones and video it, you know. And then we have other people who get involved, who are willing to step in and take risk and stop people from jumping off bridges and doing, you know. And so, yeah, I highly encourage you. That's how you defeat evil, trust me, is just make the right moves. In fact, one of the things that I had to sit down with both of my kids, I said, because I've seen all these things that happen in this world. And sometimes people have misperception of what you were really doing or whatever. It doesn't mean that you were doing the wrong things. You just might have been in the wrong place. But, you know, I mean, if a riot breaks out right here, are we in the riot or not? When we're trying to get to our car, I don't know, you know. And so you could have these perceptions, but what I told them is said, as long as whatever you were doing, you were trying to do for the right reasons, I'll back you 100%. But if I look you in the face and you look at me and say, well, I was wrong, there's a problem. I said, because you're going to be judged by society and people and things, and judgments happen all the time. But as long as you were doing it for the right reasons, it's okay. You know, I'll back you up. Because that's where we really have to, you know, we have to stand accountable for God. And so, you know, you may not be able to explain to a jury why you did what you did. You may not be able to explain to most people, but you may be able to explain it to your family, you know. And so, you know, with the deal like that, there's just a lot of people, a lot of energy, a lot of noise, a lot of, you know, and you know, let's go back to another evil. There was obviously greed involved in that. People were making lots of money. You know, well, sure. You know, let's cut a few safeguards here. I don't know. But yeah, no, it's not like they were all there to. It was not a. I don't know. Pick somebody. Yeah. 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 And so concerts even, because I thought about that. I started thinking, now, I've been to concerts. Did I ever think that was going to happen? You know, I took Cheryl to Michael Bublé years ago, and it's a big deal, and we're up in the upper bank because we can sit where we want to. We're actually looking down. Thought, okay, if I'm rushed, you know, thinking back, they were rushed the doors. I was fine. You know, we were all spread out, and it was whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happens that when people are too close to the stage, and it's hard because how do you know, but at the same time, you know, you also have people coming to things with groups of people to do evil. That's their whole purpose. They bring evil things with them. So yeah, it's a fallen world. But I think that to me, the big thing is, you know, do demons exist? I guess they do, but I just know that they're not going to have power over me because I know where to go. I know what to do. And so the other thing is that I can be the light that comes into somebody else's life, maybe not even knowing you're doing it, but I think you can. And so I think if you can confront the evil, that's, you know. But at the same time, I mean, let me close you with one thing that blew my mind as well. And I didn't spend enough time with the guy to find out if he was a Christian. But this guy has a job that you and I would think you would never, ever, ever, ever want. This guy is a child psychiatrist, okay? No big deal. Oh, but this guy deals with abused children. And so these children have had horrible things done to them beyond, you know, I mean, and so I got rotated with this guy for psychiatry, and so we got a chance to get into his world a little bit, and oh my gosh. And I remember asking him, like, how do you deal with the anger? How do you deal with these parents that have done that? How do you, you know? And his response blew me away. He said, I deal with them with love because everybody else is going to hate them. He said, trust me, everybody is going to hate them. He said, but they need healing too. And I deal with them with love. And I went, oh. key to the kingdom. Will you close us in prayer, Beverly?
Father God, we thank you for this opportunity to come and share your word and to learn and to grow. We thank you, Lord, that we have power over all these demons. We thank you, Lord, that there is nothing on this earth that can come against us when we have you in our lives. And so, Lord, we thank you for being in our lives. We thank you for this message. We thank you for the people who have come out to hear. In Jesus' name, amen.